Oh, hello. I came across a video on YouTube this week by the famous Josh McDowell, very famous Christian apologist, the author of the books Evidence That Demands a Verdict, standing there at the pulpit with his Bible open, thumping the Word of God, and we can trust this. And he goes on to say we can trust this as being the Word of God, that he's sure of it, and that he'll die for that reason, that this is the Word of God. Why? Because he started out as an atheist, and he checked, and he was finally convinced because the apostles lived and walked with Jesus for 40 days after the resurrection. They claimed that he appeared at once over 500 people. The Bible tell us this? No, just simply the Apostle Paul, who never knew Jesus. And he goes on to say that all these writings were inspired and that those 12 people knew, or the 11, I'm sorry, he goes on to say 10 or 11, not the 12, because of course we know that Judas died and that he had betrayed the Lord. But the other 10 or 11, he says, they either died martyrs' deaths or they lived in exile for their testimony of the Lord. So I wrote him and I asked, what proof do you have of this? And he responded, thanks for the important question. Where the Bible and early church documents state how the apostles died, we have as much proof as any other historical fact. There certainly is not any reliable contrary historical evidence. We can't apply one set of rules for facts documented in the Bible and another set for other historical documented facts. So he says that he was convinced that this was the Word of God because those disciples knew that Jesus had resurrected from the dead, and they died for that reason. Well, do we really have any historical proof of that? The answer is no, we don't. I did come across in the early church fathers' writings the Epistle of Clement. But in the 5th chapter of that book, he says that the apostles Peter and Paul died not because of their testimony of Christ, but through envy and jealousy. Through envy and jealousy, the greatest and most righteous pillars of the church have been persecuted and put to death. He does not say when this happened. He does not say where this happened, just that these two people died martyrs' deaths, but because of envy and jealousy. And that is the full extent of it. No details are given at all in this historical work. Now, if we can apply the same set of principles to this historical writing as we do to the Bible, I believe we should look further on into this first epistle of Clement to the Corinthians, and in chapter 25 I found a very interesting passage, and I wanted you to take a look at that, if you could find that on the internet. Clement to the Corinthians. You have all probably heard of Harry Potter, and if you've seen the movies or read the books of Harry Potter, you know that Dumbledore, the headmaster at Hogwarts School of Wizardry and Witchcraft, has a pet. He has a pet phoenix. Well, in the 25th chapter of this Epistle of Clement to the Christians at Corinth, and Clement is supposedly a disciple of the Apostle Paul, and we know how honest that all the apostles were. Let's see what he says. Chapter 25, the phoenix, an emblem of our resurrection. The phoenix. Let us consider that wonderful sign of the resurrection, which takes place in eastern lands, that is, in Arabia, and countries round about. There is a certain bird called a phoenix. This is the only one of its kind, and it lives 500 years. And when the time of its dissolution draws near that it must die, it builds itself a nest of frankincense and myrrh and other spices, into which, when the time is fulfilled, it enters and dies. But as the flesh decays, a certain kind of worm is produced, which, being nourished by the juices of the dead bird, brings forth feathers. Then, when it has acquired strength, it takes up that nest in which the bones of its parents are, and bearing these, it passes from the land of Arabia into Egypt to the city called Heliopolis. Why Heliopolis? Because it is named after the sun. And in an open day, flying in the sight of all men, it places them on the altar of the sun. And having done this, it hastens back to its former abode. The priests then inspect the registers of the dates and find that it has returned exactly as the 500th year was completed. Now, Josh McDowell, the great Christian apologist, says that we should apply the same set of rules to the Bible as to any other historical document. So, what does that tell us? This is the document in which we've learned about the martyrdom of the pillars of the church, Peter and Paul. And this is the same book that tells us about the phoenix. Should we accept one passage out of this book and reject another? Or should we accept the fact that there really is a phoenix out there, and that the priests in Heliopolis sit around waiting for the phoenix to drop the bones of its parent on the altar and then go check the records and to see how long it's been since the last time a phoenix showed up to put bones on the altar? This is intelligent way of looking at a historical work and looking upon this and believing this. If this factual writing is what Josh has truly based his position on, the Christian faith is in a world of hurt. Thanks for listening.